Please enter your conference ID and press pound to finish. Transferring you to the conference now.
To be honest, I'm going to start the work session on the budget and on what we want to do with regard to revenue neutral rate, as well as the budget discussion items that have been identified by our finance director, Matt Wolf. Good evening, just evening. Matt?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Tonight's work sessions on the 2021-2022 revised budget. It all starts with this wheel which illustrates the process for the best practice of priority-based budgeting. Priority-based budgeting is a multi-year results-based planning process for achieving identified goals prioritized by the governing body. It provides a framework and aligns resources, money, and staff to deliver what the community values most. Tonight's presentation will be broken down in these components. I'll go over budget highlights, or another way of looking at it, what is this budget delivering? The general fund, economic development fund, our utility funds, budget considerations, and then staff's recommendation. Under the council's top priority, promote economic development, we have infrastructure to support new development, Prairie Trace, Waverly Plaza, Plaza South, and Hilltop Ridge. The last three projects are all supported by benefit districts, which means the cost of those improvements and the debt service associated with them are going to be paid by the property owners. We also have planning for future infrastructure capacity, including a preliminary design for the water transmission line and a design for the new intake structure at Hillsdale Lake. Under infrastructure and asset management, we have inflow and infiltration program, water line replacement program, pavement management program, a new program, the vehicle and equipment replacement fund, and then Main Street reconstruction from Sycamore to Old Highway 56, Waverly Road reconstruction from 175th to Madison, and 167th Street from Center to Moonlight. Under quality of life, we have Quail Meadows Trail, Quail Meadows Park, Center Street sidewalk improvements, which would be the first project associated with our downtown plan. Under fiscal stewardship, I wanted to point out we controlled health insurance costs this plan year with a 0% increase. If you remember, we switched away from NPR, we hired CBiz as our broker, and we switched to Humana, and we've seen the cost savings. Also, staff was working on updating our rate studies and also updating our parks master plan. We have several new position requests: a senior staff engineer, senior maintenance worker, a maintenance worker, all in public works, 2 police officers, municipal court clerk from part-time to full-time, and a staff accountant. Through our process improvement efforts, we've identified these areas where we can build capacity and enhance performance and delivery of service, create stability and expand capabilities of public services in the police department and municipal court, and add more capacity to financial management to oversee all the new special districts and economic development programs, including CIDs, TIFs, special benefit districts, NRPs, and annexation rebates. As the city grows, it's not just the volume, it's also we're adding complexity. Other personnel changes include a building inspector to plans examiner, prosecutor to lead prosecutor, outsourced public defenders to part-time public defenders, budget neutral change. And then if you remember, during the 2022 conditional budget that you've approved, there was a 3% merit pool or $286,000. Future cost of hiring and retention is still an issue. Wage increases are increasing on a national level, and more substantial salary adjustments might be needed in the future to stay competitive in this market. The Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund would be funded by transfers from other funds. This is kind of showing you what those placeholders would look like throughout the budget. We've currently excluded the electric utility and police department. Police department has their own replacement schedule for the patrol vehicles, and the electric utility has a lot of large vehicles that are on leases. We're requesting that the 2021 and 2022 revised budget include placeholders for these programs. We won't spend any funds until we've come back with a detailed program for you to review. And then what this approach also does is it would eliminate wild swings in costs to replace vehicles and unpredictable maintenance costs and create a more stable and predictable annual expenditure. In June, we received the latest estimate from the county of a 7% increase in our valuation. Under the flat levy mill scenario, or also known as the baseline scenario, that would increase property taxes on this average single-family home by about $3.26 a month. It would also generate about $342,000 in additional property tax for the city. Please note that there is pending tax appeals, and that could lower the 2021 estimated assessed value. So under the baseline scenario, we'd end 2021 at 38%, 22 at 33%, and 2025 at 30%. We've created some new scenarios based on council's direction. One of them is a half mil reduction, which at the end of the 5 years would lower the fund balance down to 27%. Approximately $123,500 less revenue for the city, but it would generate property tax savings of about $1.17 per month for the average single-family homeowner compared to the base scenario. Another scenario is a 1 mil reduction. This would basically lower the fund balance to 25% at the end of the 5-year forecast and create about $2.35 a month in property tax savings for the average single-family homeowner. And then on the revenue neutral rate scenario, we would end at about 24% of fund balance. This would generate about $3.26 a month in average savings for the single-family homeowner, and it would be $342,000 less than the base scenario. Essentially, it'd be flat with the taxes we collected last year. Here's a quick comparison of the mill rate scenarios, and just a reminder that the mill's roughly about $247,000 now, and we do have two tax levy funds that our mill levy is divided between. About 71% goes to general fund, and about 29% goes to bond and interest. I also want to give an update on the Economic Development Fund. Just a reminder, this is funded purely by transient guest tax. That's also known as bed tax or hotel tax. We We have an adequate fund balance of about $162,000 at the end of 2022, and projected fund balance of $209,000 at the end of 2025. Just for comparison to annual expenditures, we're budgeting at roughly about $200,000 a year in 2021 and 2022. The Echo Dev Council, which was kind of created by Charter Ordinance 18 for giving recommendations on how to utilize these funds, recommended putting a budget placeholder of $45,000 in for marketing and promotion. Historically, we've usually budgeted about $25,000. During the pandemic, when we thought our bed tax would basically almost disappear on us, we cut that funding. It's being requested that's put back in at $45,000. Then the council also recommended taking a look at our small business assistance program to make it more flexible and providing support for local businesses. In the electric fund, we had a polar vortex event earlier this year, and we keep having costs come in. It's up to about $7 million in operating costs. This will eventually be passed on to customers through the power cost adjustment. We have a right now our fund balance, if you look to date, it's probably around $9.5 million. We expect to end 2022 at around $14.8 million. And then in 2025, it will be about $18.6 million. There are currently no planned rate changes for the electric fund. In the water fund, we still have a $500,000 subsidy from the wastewater fund, or from the water fund to the wastewater fund for 2022 through 2024. There's adequate fund balance of $2.2 million projected at the end of 2022, and it goes down to about 1.8 by 2025. There are planned 3.7% rate increases from 2022 through 2029. In the wastewater fund, we have adequate fund balance of $1.7 million in 2022. This actually goes up to 3.9 by 2025. We say adequate in terms of current operations and knowledge that what's increasing that fund balance is that transfer from water. And that was originally, well, while it's still projected in there, is we know of a wastewater capacity issue. We're still evaluating the sewer system, coming up with alternatives and getting better costs. We should have more information, I believe, next August or next month. At one point, we did have a project modeled in CIP, but right now it's kind of an unknown what the total cost or what exactly we are doing is. And if we actually modeled the early cost estimates, it would simply break the sewer fund. The early cost estimates are $42 million in capital investment and $1.5 million in an ongoing O&M. So some considerations to take into account is the wastewater capacity and a future impact to ratepayers. Future sales tax and use tax. Right now, it's doing fantastic. Last time I checked, it was 18% above same time last year, as of the end of June. But it likely is inflated due to federal stimulus, and it's an inherently volatile source of revenue. We also are experiencing some challenges with community growth and service levels, both from increase in volume and complexity, employee retention, and making sure we have adequate staffing. It is staff's recommendation that we go with the flat mill levy scenario, the planned increase of 3.7% for water rates, no planned increases for electric or wastewater. When we have more information on the wastewater capacity alternatives, we might want to have a more comprehensive look at what our rates, including mill rate, are, basically the whole cost of government, and see how, if we're increasing sewer rates, how can we mitigate that, the overall impact to homeowners. And then one of the goals of this budget was to build strong reserves to maintain our credit rating and put us in a stronger position for dealing with that future wastewater capacity issue. That is the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Matt. This is a open discussion. If there are any members of the public who wish to speak, we will use our discretion to identify and bring those folks up to the front. But we'll start with the council. Any questions for Matt or staff regarding the budget numbers?
Somebody else can go. I've got a bunch.
Okay. Hey, you go on and start, Mark.
Okay, so you asked for it.
Yeah, well, hey.
Matt, I don't expect you to have this number off the top of your head, but help me to get there. So let's say the city's budget was $100. What would it be for next year to just do exactly what we're doing today? No increases of anything as far as additional services, just keeping the same quality of what we're doing today. So in other words,
Mayor, point of order, I can't hear anything.
Is there any, did you hear the presentation, Randy? Yeah, did you hear me? Can someone get Randy on the line, on the phone line?
Say that again, Mayor?
Did you hear me just now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you can hear now? All right. I will encourage the members of the council to speak into the microphones just to make sure that it's being picked up.
okay, so basically where I'm going with this is just inflation, just we've been told XYZ is going to increase whatever. What would it cost us? So I'm using $100. Is it $103 in 2022 to do exactly what we do now? No improvements.
There is probably the biggest cost driver of the budget is going to be merit. That's a 3% increase that we're planning right there. Generally, when we project out, we project around 4% for personnel. The reason for that, and one of the reasons we have new staff requests right now, is to maintain current service levels isn't always possible with current staffing levels. So as we grow as a city, have more roads, more infrastructure to maintain, more complexity in our financial administration, that's why some of these requests come about.
Okay, so where I was going with this is, right, R&R is a great number. I mean, I love SB 13. I think it's great for transparency. But there's going to be a very small chance that R&R is actually doable with all the growth that we've already experienced in the last 2 years, right? So we have more roads. We put them in. We have more everything that we have to maintain. You know, utilities, infrastructure, everything. City services here for people coming in. So with that and inflation and pricing changes, I know that just to operate, we are not going to be at R&R. What I'm curious about is what that is above R&R. In other words, I think that would be our R&R. That would be our status quo number that we start at.
So you're talking keeping staff the same level.
I'm just saying to get a starting baseline, right?
Yeah, but you're saying provide the same level of services.
Correct.
We know there's a 3% increase built in for staff for the merit pool.
Right, so let's say you didn't have the 3% increase, right? You just have, here's what staff is today. We added this many miles of road, and it costs $28, a linear foot to maintain it. I made that up. Whatever it is, there's going to be a new number that says it costs this to run this city in 2022. And we've done nothing different. Then, so in other words, I think R&R is going to be below that. Okay. Then you have a separate discussion as to the priority and the necessity and urgency of all of the requests. And then we can work through those based off what we have in the delta of wherever we decide to sit with the mill rate at the end. In other words, we make those decisions before we figure out the mill rate.
Can I chime in?
Sure.
The issue for Matt and coming up with that number is, one, we projected the 3% because that's been the norm for merit pool. Everything else with regard to the inflation for the services we pay for and the things we buy is not known. I mean, we've had inflation 5 or 6% for the last couple months, so he's just guessing. So the best we can do is project what the cost increase based on what the norm is. And that's what he's done over the next 5 years.
Right, and that's perfectly acceptable. I'm not saying it has to be exact. I'm saying you built in your projections, right, a conservative amount of inflation for every year, and you have a conservative estimate for revenue changes, right? So what I'm saying is, instead of talking about R&R and the mill rate as it is now, why don't we figure out what we need to have it be, rather than start here and work our way back, right? It needs to be X to do our job, for the city to still get the same services it has now. And then, from that number, which I fully believe will be above R&R, so we're saying that we're gonna bring the mills up. Now, whether or not it's above our current mill rate, I don't know. But then, depending on the appetite of council, you may have a delta there. And then we can pick and choose based off what I would like to see from you and you is the priority of those additional things. So like the VERF, right, and all those positions. I know those are probably listed 1 through 7 as just in order, but maybe those are in urgency as well?
I believe they're the city administrator's priority rankings.
Okay, so those are ranked. Okay.
So let me talk a little bit about how we did this. So let's talk about the VERB scores. So the electric and police department had an asset management plan in place since, I think, 5-6 years ago when I got here. So we did not have that in place for the rest of the city vehicles. So we were managing assets where we would anticipate or wait till we got to failure. So we didn't have anything in the budget to prepare for the cost of doing business. So because of Senate Bill 13 and Kellen's arrival, we thought this would be an opportune time to identify what is the cost of doing business based on what we've done in the past and any anticipated needs going forward. So to have that in the budget now, when you talk about transparency, it's better to have a number based on history and what we think it's going to be going forward in the budget now, instead of waiting and not having a number in there and then in 2 years saying, hey, we need $600,000 for vehicles. So that's why we did the asset management, the vehicle plan. With regard to positions, we haven't added positions for 2 or 3 years. So we looked at positions, and I looked at positions with Matt and with Amy, and the priority was we actually looked at the gaps that we had in our project management and in our process. So as everybody up here knows, when we put responsibility on somebody beyond what either they're capable of or what they're actually by job definition responsible for, we miss things. There are mistakes made, time passes, we miss deadlines, costs increase. And we saw in the last year how expensive that can be, more than adding all these positions combined. It can be that expensive. So that's why when we looked at the top things on the positions, until you get to police officer, those are operational priorities. We were trying to fill gaps in our operation to make us efficient, so we didn't have those errors and those delays. With the police officers, there was a service gap. We get hit all the time with truck traffic and we need officers here. And the reality is we have a staffing minimum of 3 people on the streets at any given time. We're getting too big for that low of a minimum. And it used to be 2. So if you want us to be able to respond to complaints about trucks and truck traffic and traffic safety and call response and investigations, that's why the police officers are in there. So we cut this list, or I ultimately cut this list to what I thought we absolutely needed to run this city like it's supposed to.
Okay.
And we are a growing city, and we're going to have demands that we can't anticipate right now. And we have sidewalk needs, we have infrastructure needs, we have sewer needs. And to put us in a position where we attack those from a weak fund balance is, I think that's irresponsible and poor planning. Budget is a planning document. So that's how we put that together.
Wonderful.
Okay, so let's go back to that list of positions, if we could.
Cycle back to
Yeah. Okay, there we go. So I think this is what we have been talking about. And did we want to go through these positions just to identify? I mean, obviously, municipal clerk. Obviously, we're having more court happening. We have 2 dates now in the month. And we have more people coming to court, so that makes sense. We've actually had that discussion in previous council meetings. There are the public works positions. We also haven't. We filled all of our openings, correct, Kellen?
That's correct at this point.
Okay, so we're good from that perspective. And now, and I know we've saved some money. That's not the way you want to save money, but we saved some money because we had those open positions for a while. But going forward, we've got a lot of infrastructure projects coming, big road projects. I mean, that's where most of this is going to be focused on, correct, Jim?
Yeah, I can take that. So the maintenance workers primarily go towards maintenance on arterial roads. So most of the roads that have come into the city in the last few years have been arterials. The minimum crew size I need for that is 9. I have 7. We haven't added any maintenance positions since I believe about 2010.
Correct.
So that's the main driver for those positions. It also allows the maintenance crews to spread a little bit more thinly across the city and hit more things at once.
Sure.
And then the main driver for the senior staff engineer position, we've basically reached kind of saturation point for the staff engineers. In past experience with project management of large projects, I don't like to see my staff engineers get past about 10 projects at a time. Our city engineer currently has 14 on his own. So that's taking the predominance of his time away from other factors that the city engineer needs to be doing.
And there's also a potential risk that we're going to have to outsource a lot of this work. I think we have already in a couple of occasions, correct?
We have in some occasions, mostly tied to KDOT projects where it requires oversight at a level that we simply can't attain in the city. But there is opportunity for us to avoid some of that cost in the future with additional project management.
See, that's the way to justify that. We're not going to have to go outside. We'll be able to self-perform some of this work.
Can I ask a question on
Yes.
those lines? Because you talked about savings with being understaffed. How much are we spending? And I mean, I know a lot of departments are having this, and I'm going to pick on Chief Belcher because I know your department slightly better working on the CPAC. How much have we been paying in overtime because we don't have enough staff to, and I'm sure every department has this, but we're paying a lot of overtime to get adequate number of people on the roads. Where would we be saving money by hiring more officers instead of paying overtime to the ones we have?
That's a great question, and I think the city administrator hit the nail on the head with his explanation of how we are at the police department and how we're operating. It's going to have, we're going to be able to have a focused area of traffic enforcement and taking a lot of burden off of other officers. So we're going to be able to concentrate on those truck routes. We're going to be able to concentrate on those commercial vehicle inspections. We're going to be able to concentrate on those areas where we have speeding vehicles and reports. Those come in every day, and they're all over the city. And it's very difficult for us to address those issues if we don't have the appropriate number of staff to do that. And we're trying to get everyone to cover that and do everything else, where we actually would have a focus group to be able to accomplish that.
Does this revenue neutral rate include any new subdivisions that have come online?
It doesn't. The revenue neutral rate doesn't take any new growth into account.
Correct. And we've had 2 new subdivisions come online in the last 2 years that were not included in the previous calculations. Is that correct?
Well, we've had several approved ones, yes, the 2 approved, but we're also in the process right now of another one that's almost 300 units coming online here in the process, as well as some of the apartment projects that we've been dealing with. So one of the things I leaned over and told Kellen too, from an engineering perspective, as this development picks up, we are eating up more time of staff engineering review as part of our planning review process. So that is also something that is being placed in one position currently, and I think we could see that being a full-time position at some point here in the future.
Just trying to build some context here. Any other questions for you, Tom?
Not on this slide.
All right, well, please continue.
I'm good with the explanation that the city administrator gave. I mean, we hired him to run this organization, and these directors have said, I need X, Y, Z. He cut it down, and he's provided this. I don't have a problem with it. Let's present it. No, I'm good.
And I just want to clarify on this slide here. This is not everything that was requested. It is what you consider the bare minimum to get by.
And I agree, and I talked to Jim about some of these as well, and I felt very comfortable with the ask on these.
I mean, understanding, obviously the police officers, that's critical because we now have a larger road network to manage. We have to do enforcement not only on the streets that we've already had in the portfolio, we also have 190th Street now that's on our list. And the truck enforcement over there too. So traffic is becoming much more of a portion of our responsibilities now. Am I not correct in that, Chief?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And, one thing I think that it's important to remember is that, these two positions, which will be focused with traffic, they're going to do more than just commercial vehicle inspections and enforcement. They're going to be doing, accident prevention. They're going to be doing DUI enforcement. I mean, they're going to have all aspects of traffic. So it's just not going to be one central focus, but they're certainly going to tackle all those issues.
I'm good with this list, and actually last time I said that I thought the police officers should be paid more money, and that's obviously a discussion for another time, I think, but that seems low to me. But I'm good with the list.
You're going to start seeing wage pressure in a number of different categories, especially if we go from $7 minimum wage to $15. You're going to start, because police officers are right at $20 on the low end to start. You're going to see us having trouble competing. You're already seeing upward wage pressure because nobody wants to be a police officer. So that's
I
good.
get it. I mean, that's one selling. I mean, our community is safe because of the police department, and if we don't play our police enough, that could be an issue. So
And
I'm still concerned about that, but I like the list.
And believe me, it was a lot worse before.
Oh, I know.
I mean, we and because you were on the council earlier, and what we did in order to try to bridge that gap. Obviously, that gap continues to accelerate, and some of it's because of the fact that now places like here are more attractive now for officers. Maybe they might take an initial salary that's a little lower to come to a place like this, but other municipalities will be able to outbid, and that's what it comes back to. Organizations like ours who treat our officers well are places where people would potentially want to come. So, all right. Anything else on this slide? All right. What else you got?
So let's go to the projections slide. Unless anybody wanted to talk about these other things.
Well, I think the vehicle and equipment replacement fund, we've needed that since I became a councilman. I'm glad to know that it's actually being implemented. It's been long overdue, particularly around public works. We've really needed to get much more in tune with our vehicle needs, and it's good to see that that's being addressed.
Which slide in particular did you want to go to?
So why are we looking out 3 years? I'm just curious. Why 2025? Why not 2023 and 2024?
It's kind of based around our CIP, which, we have the CIE 20-year look, and we have CIP 5-year look, so we kind of make sure we have funding associated with that 5-year plan.
I was curious if that forecast was accurate.
I will say, when you start going out that far, it gets less accurate.
Sure, absolutely. So, do you have on hand what the projections are for the fund balance for 2023 and 2024?
Not right on hand. Obviously, we have them in our models, but I have them for the utilities, I think, written down, but I don't have them for the general fund.
So, I understand the goal from staff's perspective was to build reserves, and I understand the reason why, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. My point of view is that 2025 is a good number to look at, and I have no problem using it as a comparison, but I would really like to see 2023 and 2024, since we're looking at 22 and 23, to say, okay, the projection is going down, we're falling off a cliff if we do half a mil or a full mil, whatever. But in 2022, we see that it's 33% on this page, right, for both scenarios. Okay, that's great. What is it in 2023? When does it start falling off, and how fast?
It builds as you go farther out. And the reason for that, that's when those kind of assumptions on your inflation factor for expenses and revenues. We generally are conservative with revenues and less conservative, and we expect expenses to go up more than revenue, so that's why it starts building towards the deficit.
So what I think would be the interesting comparison between these different scenarios would be, since the council has previously said that we want to keep a fund balance around 30%, 28 to 30% is what we discussed before. So at which year does each of those scenarios hit that window? So obviously flat, we're still at 30% in 2025, which means you're above it until then. Half a mil, we're at 27% in 2025. But in 2023, when we might still be at 30% or 29%, which to me means we have time to adjust, because we can always raise mills in the future. Even doing a 2-year budget, even looking at a projection, we don't have to collect the money today. We can always collect it later. There's no real benefit to me in having it today.
So, when you do these projections, then, let's say it's a 0.5 mil reduction scenario, how do you project the mill for the next few years then? Is it a 0.5 every year?
We used a 3% increase, and we did that based on if new growth is between 1 to 2%, and then some kind of inflation factor, we combine those two to be around 3%.
So the flat mill levy revenues increased by about 7%, correct? Because the mills are increasing by.
Yes, the city's valuation increased by 7%. Generally, for the revenues, we'd expect 3 to 4% if we needed enough to cover the general inflation and capture new improvements.
Okay. So if we were to go to a 0.5 mil reduction, just piggybacking off of what Mark is talking about, does that still assume that the same budget priorities would be able to be addressed? So are you talking like when we're talking about the additional positions, the 3% merit pool,
Yes.
the BRF?
Every scenario has all of those built in.
Okay, so you could take the 0.5 mil reduction. That less revenue for the city will actually be, again, I'm just trying to explain this for the folks that are watching. We would get less revenue for the city relative to the flat rate, but it would still be an increase of about $200,000, $220,000 or $230,000 over what we had last year. So it'd still be a revenue increase to the city, but it would just be at a lower level. We'd still be able to fund the projects and priorities that we've identified through the budget process. We would just have a lower fund balance.
I believe your line of reasoning is correct. Basically, you can look at, I try to refer to the flat mill levy scenario as a baseline, because that's what these are comparing to.
Yep.
So another way to look at it is, okay, a half mil reduction. Now I say it's $123,000 less than the flat mill, but if you remember, the flat mill levy scenario was $342,000 extra compared to last year.
Yep.
Yeah, to me, regardless of which mill scenario you're looking at, we have a target goal for the fund balance. And if sounds like we're all on board with the expense changes for the budget, right? All the things that were presented by staff.
I think that's, yeah.
Assuming that's the case, then we know what our expenses are, and they're in this scenario. So really, it's just choosing where do you want your fund balance to be, at which year. And to me, as long as you're at 30% in 2023, I don't care where it is in 2024 and 25 today, because next year we could change it, and the year after we could change it.
Sure, but it's a lot easier to raise to lower taxes than it is to raise taxes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is that assumes a 0.5 mil reduction, so we would be at was it 20.1 and change, okay, 20.165. All right, and that would be for the entire period, right, the 5-year period. And that's where those projections come in, and that assumes an increase in property values like we've seen in the past, correct?
I'm projecting 3% increases.
That's conservative.
Yes.
Because we're seeing, on average, 6 to 9% increases in Gardner for the last 5 years.
I didn't want to assume that we'd be able to capture that all.
Oh, no, I totally understand that. So we could potentially even lower mills more if we continue to see our revenue improvements and still be able to meet our fund balance targets, potentially. All right? Understand our finance people are very good at projecting conservatively. So that's actually a good thing. We want that conservative projection.
Right. They're erring on the conservative side, which
Absolutely.
I applaud that. I'm not faulting anything that's
Okay.
been brought up.
All right. So what are you thinking? The half mil reduction, or are you thinking?
I would like Matt to pull up his spreadsheet and tell me what the fund balance is at the end of 2023 for all 4 scenarios.
Do we have that?
That'll take a little bit to model.
Can I ask a question based kind of off of what Mark's saying? So you want to maintain the 30% fund balance to help maintain our credit rating.
True.
So when people are looking to give us a credit rating, what projection are they looking at? Are they looking at the 4 and 5 years out? Are they looking at what we have right now?
They generally look about 2 to 3 years out. They also take into account not just what the fund balance percentage is, what's your operating deficit or surplus.
And what's your current debt load too? That's a big part of it. Debt to revenues is very, very important.
Right. If our fund balance was 80%, they're still gonna, it's gonna bring up questions if, we cut it and we're operating at a minus $2 million a year, rate.
Oh yeah.
So
But if they're
it's all-
looking at 2025, then we need to be looking at that. If they're looking at 2021 only, then that adjusts.
We're definitely buying down or paying down our fund balance during this period. In any of the scenarios, actually, because we're going to have significant expenses in the outlying years coming forward, 2024, 2025. We do have some debt rolling off, but we've done a good job of refinancing that debt. I don't know how the markets are going to be in 2 or 3 years. We may not be able to take advantage of that. We've got to take that into consideration too.
Just so I'm clear, when rating analysts look at this, they focus heavily on past performance, like how did the last year go, and then they look at your budget, and they basically want to know what's your plan and how well did you achieve your plan when we next talk, basically.
Right.
So if you're projecting that you're going to have a budget surplus of $400,000, and all of a sudden you're showing a deficit of $500,000, they're going to know why and why didn't you make adjustments, basically.
And that all comes out in the ratings call that we have for every two times every year. We have that ratings call with S&P, and they look at that.
The biggest concern in past years is when we had that huge fund balance, like 2014 or so, and we were spending that down.
50%.
They were a little bit worried that we still had a pretty large operating deficit when we were getting close to our fund balance minimum.
Yep.
So can I ask then, in your opinion, projecting out at a R&R rate that goes down to what, 24%, I think, on your projections, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How much of difference on our credit rating and those kind of things? And I know it's only one piece of it, but compared to the 30% with the flat mill rate.
That's difficult to answer. They look at a lot of different factors, and they're not going to look that far out in our forecast generally. It's really coming down to council's risk level. Like, what's the amount of risk that you want to take on with your fund balance?
I think it's pretty clear that scenario 4 is not even in the picture unless there's another council member who would like to dispute that.
Mayor, this is Councilman Gregorczyk. I don't mean to interrupt, but I can only hear about every third word.
All right.
I can hear everything that Matt says, but while I have the floor, sir,
Yes.
and I apologize for being on family vacation. Well, I don't apologize for my family. I apologize for me not being there. My I guess my opinion, why I have the floor, is that we reduce the mill by 0.5% and increase the pilot by equal amounts, not affecting our credit rating as well as our plan. And much of what I heard Councilman Baldwin speak to, I agree 100%.
So it would not be, well, what you're talking about is the dollar amounts. You're talking about taking an additional $120,000, correct, from the
$123,500 to be exact, yes, sir.
from the electric fund in the form of an increased pilot to make up the shortfall, and then you're still able to handle all of the general fund obligations and be able to keep the same level of fund balance.
Correct. If you look at the history of the electric utility fund, and I don't want to get into a long, drawn-out conversation because obviously I'm not there to defend it in 100% since I can only hear about every third word. It was built to do just that, and that is to lessen the pain of our constituents, which is $3.26 per month for the mill levy that we're talking about. It was to lessen that pain and to leverage the assets that we have in place to offset that. I might be I guess the best word is to say that I might be, in the minority, but I do know the history of that electric utility fund.
Okay, so let me go ahead and ask Matt a question here. Matt, what would be the amount that we would have to increase the pilot from electric fund to general fund in order to be able to cover a shortfall of $123,000 and change?
It would be the same. I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but I mean, you could increase it. You could change the percentage to match whatever you need to do to offset that $123,000.
Okay, so I know we're at 5%
Correct.
now. I don't know how much that is in terms of dollars.
I would say it's probably around 0.5%, maybe a little bit less.
Okay.
Yeah, the math. Excuse me, Mayor. The math
Yep.
that I come up with is 0.75, Matthew. And you can check me. You're the bean counter, but 0.75 is what I come with. That would offset that cost, drive down the exposure to the citizens, our constituents, our ratepayers on the tax side, and not increase the electric utility fund, I might add.
Okay, that's a
Or
1 year.
increase the electric utility cost. I apologize,
No, that's
Mayor.
all right. That's all right. So that's a 1 year solution because it would be a one-time hit from the pilot unless you want to maintain that pilot at the new level throughout the entire period.
You're correct, Mayor, and that goes right back to what Councilman Baldwin said, is that we would take a look at that year to year and adjust that high or low with the idea, and I'm not speaking for Councilman Baldwin, but myself, with the idea that we would leverage the electric utility fund in order to offset said mill increase, for which I'm well in tune with a $0.5 mil decrease, which would be about $123,500 approximately.
Okay, let me give Council Vice President a chance to respond.
To me, that's robbing Peter to pay Paul. I detest property taxes more so than any other tax, more so than income taxes. But using the utility as a use tax for the general fund is a short-term solution, in my opinion. Now, we need to, when do we have our next rate study scheduled? Do we have a date? It's got to be coming up in the next year or two.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're
Well, that's my point, Councilman Baldwin, and I hate to interrupt you, sir, but that's my point, is that it is a short term. You're exactly right, sir. And once we can receive that rate study, we can true it up. But at the end of the day, decreasing the mill rate to our constituents, I think, is the name of the game, and leveraging the assets that we have at hand, short term, albeit to your point, and I agree, would be the opportunity for us to level set in order to move into steady state. And I believe there's other taxing entities that are well positioned to decrease the mill rate to 0.5%, considering, I think we need to consider what the positive is from Logistics Park Kansas City for the city of Gardner.
Yes, to finish answering your question, Councilman Baldwin, as Matt alluded to during his presentation, we are waiting for some numbers back on what the new sewage treatment options may cost so that we can look at what the overall impact to the ratepayer may be, even if that includes adjusting perhaps the electric or the water rate.
Right. So I think utilities, obviously with wastewater, we're going to have a huge rate increase with $42 million plant if that's what ends up happening. So it would be wonderful to have a electric decrease at the same time. And we obviously are over collecting on electric. We have been for several years. We've built up our coffers. There's no reason to be collecting as much as we do now. So that should be reduced. But I do not want to set a precedent of stealing from the utility to cover that, because then next year we go, well, yeah, it kind of worked out and it was a one-time deal. Why not another one-time deal? And I'm not trying to make light of what you said, Randy. I'm trying to just say that I think it's a bad precedent. So to me, if we reduce the mill rate from the flat rate and it drops our fund balance, albeit to still an appropriate level that we're all good with, right? If at the end of 2023 it's still at 28%, 29%, 30%, we've done our job. We've lowered mills as much as we could. We didn't change the pilot. We didn't affect utility rates in a negative way. And we have saved as much as we can without affecting our credit rating. And then we can still change it next year and the year after when we have more growth. That's where I'm coming from.
And I tend to agree with Mark. And I think also, if we're really, needing to offset that, I mean, we can look and see how things play out, but we have the VERF money set aside as well. I mean, if it looks like we really need to rob something, I mean, that would be, we could lower those numbers.
I guess that my biggest concern is regarding when you're looking at the electric fund, and we say it's very, very robust, and it was very robust. And we needed that electric fund because when that cold snap hit and we had $7.5 million come out of that fund over the space of 3 weeks, if we hadn't had that electric reserve there, our utility could have gone belly up. I mean, there are many counties, many municipalities in the state that are part of KMEA. That's exactly what happened. They had terrible struggles, their city-owned electric utilities, to be able to continue those as a sustainable entity because of the fact they didn't have fund balance. So yes, I understand where you're coming from, Mark, that we're collecting too much. That's the reason why we're building up a fund balance. But man, it came in handy in February. And so I think that from that perspective, we need to be cognizant of that and make sure that we're not, buying down or paying down reserves necessarily. And understand, when I first came into the seat as mayor, I was looking at a pilot increase. I thought it would be a good idea. I think that KC, the BPU of KCK is 8%, if I'm not mistaken, and it makes some sense. But I'm sorry, it's more than that now. Oh boy, but that's the whole point. It can creep up, right?
I want to say it's like
12 now? Okay. When I first came into the seat, it was at 8. So that tells you everything of it that you need to know about pilot creep. And you're right, Mark. Once you set that precedent, it could continue to increase. And so, from my perspective, I think if we're going to cut this mill by a half mill, we have to come up with general fund adjustments, not necessarily electric fund adjustments, to be able to make up the difference, if that's what we want to do and continue to keep our fund balances. That's
And Matt and I have talked about that scenario quite a bit, and we can work with a half mil reduction.
We can work with half mil reduction. Okay. If it's
So-
yes.
Thank you, Mayor. So I appreciate everybody's input, and we all look at it from a different perspective, although we all represent a portion of the community. If you look at Casey, Mark, Tori, Todd, myself. My perspective is, A, not to set a precedence, but to leverage the assets that we have at our disposal. Second of all, not to increase the mills, but rather reduce it, considering it's $247,000. Second of all, if you work at a $12 million benchmark and you take 10% of that, that's approximately a half a mil. And I'm not interested in setting precedent by any means. I don't set precedent, and I'm mixing the flavors here, ladies and gentlemen. I don't set the precedent when I have to dip into my savings or otherwise my assets in order to bridge gaps. More importantly, it's to get across that gap. And I would rather get across that gap with assets that we have in place at no cost to the citizens, considering 10% of $12 million is $120,000, not setting the precedent, and then reevaluating in the outlying years as soon as next year, for that matter. That's where I stand.
Since we can look at it next year, like you just said, I don't see how touching the pilot gains us anything, because we can reduce the mill rate and still be fine with the fund balance. And in fact, what I think would be great is if everybody would say, here's the fund balance I want to see at the end of 2023 or 2024 or both, and then we say, Matt, tell us which mill rate gives us that. Not 1, 2, and 3 scenario, but the exact number, right? It doesn't have to be a half or a 1. It could be 0.783. I don't care what the number is, right? But it achieves the goal that we set out, that meets the expenses and the fund balance.
Well, we're getting close to time right now. We've got a council meeting in 5 minutes. If we're going back and asking staff to look at this again, then obviously we're going to have another meeting on this, because we've got to turn around our budget and get it ready for a hearing by the next meeting. Am I not correct in that?
No, the entire timeline is extended due to Senate Bill 13.
Okay.
Public hearing is going to be on the first meeting in September, the day after Labor Day.
So we could still have another work session at the
Correct.
meeting.
Correct.
We are running pretty tight on time on developing the budget and giving the public ample
Yep.
time to review it.
I don't think we would need another work session, though. I think if I can get input from everybody as to where you want it to be, we give that number to Matt. He runs the scenario until he gets that number, and we're done.
Well, let's take a look at those projections again, Rand.
I do want to reiterate what Matt said, that it makes it more difficult doing 3 years when you have a CIP that looks at 5 years.
Correct.
So if everybody's okay with 27% at 5 years, then what's the use of looking back at 3 or 4 years? I mean,
Yeah,
if
so-
everybody's comfortable with 27 at 5.
Well, 27 to 28, I think, is where that's a low tolerance. It's doable. It's doable. And if we need to adjust to get to a higher fund balance, like 28 to 29%, then we can look at how our revenues are looking at that point, and looking at how much of our new development has come online. Because I'm telling you right now, we need to capture that new development revenue. I'm sorry. That's the whole reason why we're doing this exercise. And if the R&R is not going to include new development, then why even do it? Why even do new development?
Well, you'll get it in the future.
Well, sir, we want new development.
Of course.
We'll have to do workarounds with Senate Bill 13, sir. So let's not get ahead of ourselves, although I understand the gist of it. I think you've had Baldwin and several others speak to options, albeit not comfortable for all. But we have options within our house, if you will. I'm comfortable with 28%. no pilot increase, and then look at the outlying years.
What year 28%, Randy? At the end of what budget year?
Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
At the end of what budget year are you comfortable with 28% in the fund balance?
If my notes are correct, 2023.
Okay.
Wow.
Where's everybody else?
2023.
Yeah, Randy, we were talking about 5 years out at 27%
Yeah.
with the $500,000 decrease.
Well, Jim, I appreciate that clarification. I've only heard about the first 3 words of every 4 words, so I apologize. I would concur.
Okay.
I'm good with the $500,000 reduction with the 27 and 2025.
Can we get those numbers worked and then sent out on a Friday minute memo maybe?
So the numbers you want to see are the in-between years when we're going down?
But do we need that if we're all comfortable with the 5%
I mean,
mill reduction?
unless you
it
wanna
sounds
see
like I'm now in the minority, so if that's where we go, that's where we go, and it's $500,000. But I would be perfectly fine if at the end of 2023 you're at 29 or 30%, and if that's 0.623 mils, I'm good with that. And then next year we can revisit. I'm saying the fund balance
Well,
at the end of 2023.
Yeah,
would be 29 or 30%.
I understand that. We're working on a biennial budget, though. That's the problem. It's a 2-year budget cycle, so we'd have to do an adjustment on the budget and have to make a mid-course correction on the mills.
We have to
Are you
vote
not-
on it every year, and we have
Mayor,
SB 15 now anyway.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, the adjustments shouldn't be. We shouldn't be bothered by that, sir. That's an operational issue.
I don't correct me if I'm wrong, Finance Director Wolf, but I don't think that's necessarily how the biennial budget process works, is it?
Well, every year. Sorry.
I'm not sure I'm really clear on what you're trying to accomplish here. Like, why would you want to change the mills? Like, if you were trying to target 29% by 2023, we could basically look at our expenditures, and if we need to, we could either delay and wait to see how revenues come in, and then say we could take some of these positions, wait till mid-year next year, and hire them at that point, knowing what revenues are like.
Again, if we're in 5 years, if everybody's comfortable with 27%, we can work with that.
To answer your question, Matt, my goal is to get us down to the absolute minimum we're comfortable with for the fund balance, and then stay there.
Correct.
So once we get there, if that's at the end of 2023, the 2-year process, so we approve it, and we're at 33% at the end of 2022, yay us, and then next year you come back and say, hey, numbers were this, and they were way up or way down, and we have to go through this whole process anyway with SB 13, we can say,
Correct.
oh, we're going to raise mills, we're going to lower mills, we're going to do nothing. But in 2023, where our projection instead of being 29 or 30% is now, it's looking at 31. Oh, okay, we'll just leave it as it is, and then we'll just stay there. That's my goal. I don't really care if in 10 years it's going to fall off a cliff because we're going to adjust it before then. I get what you did. I have no problem with that. But what I'm saying is I want to get it to the 28, 29, 30% and just stay there forever.
Well, if that's the case, then I think from the standpoint of rating agencies, they want to see a balance closer to 30% than 27%.
We've heard over the years 26 to 30%. So, and there's no way to know. Moody's and S&P can change their mind at any time, and it seems like it's half a guess.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Yes, sir. I concur with you, Mark Baldwin. This is a moving target, guys. I mean, my retirement's a moving target, for goodness sakes, and I don't mean to compare my retirement with the city budget, but we have operational flexibility to move this number plus or minus 1 to 1.5%.
Any direction on terms of the percentage fund balance like you talked about, or the mill levy, either direction would work from my perspective. But if I could get that sometime tonight,
Okay,
that'd
so
be very helpful.
So you want 2023 as the target at 28%.
The end of 2023, yeah, 28, 29, 30, somewhere in there, whatever everybody else is comfortable with, but that's the window I'm looking at.
Well,
28 would be the low side.
I was comfortable with the 0.5 mill rate reduction.
Yeah.
it sounds like the
think
folks on
0.5.
this dais are looking at the 0.5 mil reduction.
I concur.
There you go. That's it then.
I think we got consensus.
Thank you for
Let's-
the direction.
Let's work up the numbers and then.
You just gave them to us. We're
No,
done.
for our own information, from the standpoint of how it's going to look on those 2023, 2024 years that you were looking Okay, so we'll just for our own information, not for decision purposes. Okay, thank you. We're starting our council meeting a little late. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Appreciate it. We're going to take a 1-minute break so that we can
Sounds good.
grab something to drink, and then we'll be right back.
Amy, sorry, Amy. You can go through all this.
Sorry. Sharon printed that off.
Oh, Sharon did. Okay. Are you going to go through it with us?
All right, we're getting back. We're starting. All right, it's 7:05 in the evening in Gardner, Kansas. We're starting a little bit late because we had a work session. I'm going to call the Gardner City Council meeting to order. Will you please rise with me if you can for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have a presentation on the 2021 Gardner Fireworks Survey results. Very popular survey that got the greatest amount of response from any of our previous surveys. Deputy City Administrator Amy Nasta, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm happy to present the results of the City of Gardner's 2021 Fireworks Survey to you this evening. At the July 6, 2021 Gardner City Council meeting, the governing body requested that staff conduct a citizen survey regarding fireworks. The survey was hosted on SurveyMonkey from Friday, July 9th through Friday, July 23rd. Staff notified residents of the survey via the city website, social media, Constant Contact, and Textcaster. While there are numerous varied methods for hosting a survey, SurveyMonkey was selected in order to provide the most efficient, cost-effective method for gathering citizen responses. To that end, a total of 3,358 responses were received. This is just over 2,000 more responses than any previous city survey hosted on SurveyMonkey. This also includes 3 paper copies supplied as part of a request for accommodation. While the sample size of the paper copies is small, the responses included varied in a manner similar to those included in the electronic responses. Though it is not visually demonstrated here, the answer to the first survey question, "Are you a Gardner resident?" gated the balance of the questions. Only those responding that they were Gardner residents were able to complete the survey. 3,256 respondents, or 97.05%, indicated they were Gardner residents. The second survey question asked respondents to detail any fireworks-related concerns they may have experienced. When interpreting the data, it is important to note that respondents could select as many items as they wished on this question. Approximately 52% of respondents indicated they had no fireworks-related concerns, while concerns with debris and concerns about fireworks being discharged outside of allowed dates or times were each identified as concerns by 32 to 36% of respondents. 6% of respondents identified property damage as a concern. This question additionally allowed respondents to utilize a text box to specify any other concerns they may have experienced. Approximately 9% of respondents provided a verbatim response to the question regarding concerns. These responses were then categorized and are shown in the graphic displayed on your screen. The size of each category name is representative of the amount of times a particular concern was included in the response, with concerns regarding dates and times, locations, the type of fireworks being utilized, and noise being the most prevalent. Other responses included positive comments, concerns about neighbors, safety concerns, comments regarding enforcement, and concerns about high-impact groups. When asked if the discharge of fireworks should be allowed in the city of Gardner, 79% of respondents indicated they believe fireworks should be allowed, while 21% indicated fireworks should not be allowed. In the Friday Minute Memo last week, staff provided the governing body with a basic overview of the survey results. In the overview, a set of graphs was provided in which responses from those who indicated fireworks should be allowed were differentiated from responses from those who indicated fireworks should not be allowed. For the purpose of clarity, the remainder of this presentation will focus instead only on the responses as a whole, meaning each graph is representative of all responses received to a given question, not just from one particular respondent group. The next 3 survey questions discuss the degree of restriction that respondents believe dates, times, and locations for fireworks discharge should be subject to as compared to the 2021 regulations. Response categories were comprised of a 5-point scale ranging from significantly more restrictive to significantly less restrictive, with a neutral option of stay about the same. For dates of discharge, approximately 48% of respondents felt that the dates should remain the same, while approximately 36% believed the dates should be more restrictive to some degree, and 16% believed they should be less restrictive to some degree. For times of discharge, approximately 55% of respondents felt the time should remain the same, while approximately 33% believed the time should be more restrictive to some degree, and 12% believed they should be less restrictive to some degree. Finally, for locations of discharge, approximately 59% of respondents felt the location should remain the same, while approximately 29% believe the location should be more restrictive to some degree, and 12% believe they should be less restrictive to some degree. Respondents were asked to rate how they felt about the current 7-day time frame for fireworks sales. Approximately 63% of respondents felt the time frame was just right, 23% believe the time frame included too many days, and approximately 14% believe too few days were included. The next question allowed respondents to specify the number of days they believe fireworks should be sold for. These responses were then categorized and are shown in the graphic displayed on the screen before you. Approximately 64% of respondents believe fireworks should be sold for 7 days or more. An additional 26% believe sales should last somewhere between 1 and 6 days, and 5% believe fireworks should not be sold at all. Approximately 2% felt the number of days of sale should be related to the number of days allowed for discharge. Respondents were then asked to rate the number of days of discharge fireworks were allowed for. Approximately 53% believe the current amount of 3 days was just right, 31% felt there were too many days allowed for discharge, and 16% believe there were too few days included. Respondents were also asked if the discharge of fireworks should be allowed on the day after Independence Day. The responses were split relatively evenly, with 49% saying discharge should be allowed after Independence Day and 51% indicating it should not be allowed. The next question asked respondents to rank 4 sets of dates and an other category, which allowed them to enter their own sets of dates. July 2nd through July 4th obtained the highest ranking, followed by a close ranking between July 3rd and 4th and July 3rd through 5th. July 4th only received a significantly lower ranking, while the other category received the lowest ranking of all. The other responses have been categorized and are shown on your screen. Responses falling into the category of more than 3 days were the most prevalent, followed by responses indicating fireworks should not be allowed. Other categories with numerous responses include basing discharge dates on the calendar day Independence Day falls on, and dates that were already listed in the date selections. Less than 3 days, 3 days, not after the holiday, and shifting the focus to enforcement comprise the balance of the categories. In the next question, respondents were asked to rate the current fireworks end time of 11 p.m. 62% felt the end time was just right, 28% felt the end time was too late, while 10% believed it was too early. Finally, respondents were asked if the discharge of fireworks should be allowed later on Independence Day itself than on other days. The responses again were split relatively evenly, with 51% saying discharge should be allowed later on Independence Day and 49% indicating it should not. Staff will provide a copy of the results of the survey on the city's website for the public to view later this week. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Amy, are the individual responses also going to be on the website for review as well?
I can do the categories, like the ones who answered yes and the ones that answered no, so the comparison categories, but I can't sort them by individual.
I'm talking about like the comments, the free-form comments.
I will do the free-form comments that are not simply numeric or something like that.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, great.
That are actually have substance or context to them. Anything that's simply numeric, I'll just include in the graphic that we already have.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other questions, comments from the group here?
If anything, the data reinforced that fireworks are overwhelmingly popular, because you said it was beat the last survey by 2,000. Which I believe the record holder was the fireworks survey from before.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
The data just is more reinforced at this point. The only thing that may want to be discussed in the future that I saw was if we switched it to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th and made the 4th be midnight. Based off the data provided.
Based on the data, it seems that that there's a majority, although it be slim majority, of folks that say they don't want to have discharge the day after the 4th of July, which to me makes some sense because definitely people have work the next day normally. So,
I mean, we don't have.
Yeah, Mayor.
Yes, Randy.
No, thank you. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm probably a little bit delayed. I appreciate the study. I appreciate, most importantly, the citizens, the 3,000 plus that took the time to take the survey. I think the survey and the data, to Mark's point, speaks volumes. I would support the second, third, and fourth. And I don't know that outside of Dr. Winters or Councilman Winters, in addition to the second, third, and fourth, maybe discussing limiting the days of sale of said fireworks.
If we're following the data, it didn't show that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it was clear that the majority thought that 7 days was sufficient.
yeah.
Yeah, I understand, and I may be in the minority, but nonetheless, it should be considered.
Is there any interest in considering it on the part of the folks at the dais here?
Is this information that we want to send back to a citizen committee to review, or do we want to make the decision?
Well, if we send it back to CPAC, then obviously there would be a recommendation coming from that for an ordinance change.
At this
is
point,
that-
it looked like most people said they like how it's going. I mean,
I got that sense too.
Yeah.
But we'd have to change the ordinance anyway. If we decide we're going to go to second, third, and fourth, we'd have to change the ordinance anyway.
I appreciate your suggestion, Casey. I don't think we would need it to go back to committee since we have 3,400 responses telling us what the committee should be telling us.
no, I understand.
So that would be my only reason not to. And we don't have to do anything, but if we did anything based off the data, it would be second, third, fourth, and then looking at later. It didn't define later
On just the
but
fourth.
I figured midnight would be later enough.
On just Independence Day.
Yes.
This is kind of an out there question, but could we also consider like New Year's Eve in this ordinance? I know you can't buy them because there's nobody selling them, but
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to rework the ordinance,
That's open, sure.
Actually, some of the verbatim responses were for New Year's Eve or other holidays. They were just included in more days.
I've had people ask me about New Year's.
It has been
That's
brought
why it wasn't just my idea. So.
Okay, so everybody like the idea of the second, third, fourth?
Yes.
I think that's a consensus.
Everybody good with midnight on the fourth?
I'm back and forth on that only because I think communication-wise, having the exact same hours on every day makes it just easier to put out the information. You say, hey, how late do fireworks go? 11 or
Exactly.
12 or whatever we decide. But I prefer them all to be consistent just on a communication standpoint.
That's exactly.
Yeah, I would concur with Casey. Furthermore, we have to understand, although the data is extremely valid, and again, I appreciate the citizens that spoke to this or took the time to take it's still less than 50% of the total number of houses that we have in our community, which is approximately 880 houses.
So
I think it's 8,800.
I'm sorry, 8,080 houses. Thank you, Mayor.
So to Casey's point, are we good with midnight on the second, third, and fourth? I mean, they said later, and
so late.
Yeah.
I think 11. That's what
No.
that'd be my vote.
I like 11 probably.
okay, hey,
Yeah,
it's what the data said.
I like 11.
Yeah, I mean, the data did say that slightly more than 50% were interested in pushing it back to midnight on the 4th. It was definitely pretty evenly split.
It was.
So I would almost say that we keep it at 11, see how it goes. I think folks will be very happy to have the second, third, and fourth. It was easily the highest ranking of the responses for proposed dates. And then obviously we'll be revisiting this again at after next year.
So everybody good with New Year's Eve?
I am.
No.
2 yays, 1 no.
Let's
I'm just trying to work this out so Amy can bring us back the ordinance and we'll be done with it.
yeah, I understand that.
No, we don't need to debate things to them.
So exactly what would New Year's Eve look like? What would
Probably
be
like
the
Independence
hours?
Day would be glorious.
Yeah,
Not
but I
worth
mean,
discussing.
what are we talking about here in terms of time?
Well, because times on New Year's Eve would have to go past midnight.
Well,
obviously.
Yeah.
You would have, but that's one day that you would have to control.
So would
7
we
months
would we
away.
do
Not-
it New Year's Eve from 8 to midnight, or do we do New Year's Eve from 8 to midnight and then New Year's Day from midnight to 3 a.m.? Like,
Oh, my
how
goodness.
late do we allow them
Don't
to do it?
don't even support it. Nope. Don't open that box.
Yeah, I like the fireworks, but I'm not ready to get into a whole other day yet.
I was gonna say
let's put it this
11:30
way.
to 12:30.
I love me my fireworks.
I like that
I mean, the idea is for New Year's, right? You're not gonna shoot them off for 12 hours.
I love me
Like,
my
it'd be like 1 a.m. the following day, or whatever.
I love me
Yeah,
my
I
fireworks, but
believe
there's a
that we
lot of
tabled
people
this
out there that are
subject personally.
intoxicated that try to set off.
Another
They would
good
try to
point.
set off fireworks too.
That
Do you
happens
think
on the
there?
4th,
Yeah. Do you
too.
think there's more or less on
Exactly.
Independence Day?
Oh,
I think there's more on.
I think it'd be more on New Year's Eve.
I don't know. I bet there's less people out on New Year's Eve shooting off fireworks. So where are we?
I'm probably in the minority on this one. Who wants to do fireworks on New Year's Eve?
No.
No for me.
We have 3 on the dais that say yes.
I disagree.
So let's bring it back in.
Vehemently.
We'll vote on it.
I can bring it back with an ordinance and you can vote on it as Councilmember
And
Baldwin
if you bring
suggested.
it back to the full ordinance, including New Year's Eve, we could still edit the ordinance. to vote on it.
Absolutely, you can always strike a portion of an
And
ordinance.
I like Mark's times of 11:30 to 12:30, just a very small, limited.
Okay.
But that.
I'm as I said, I'm probably in the minority on this one.
I'm with.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know, people are shooting them off anyway, and at least then they wouldn't be breaking the rules, and the police could then focus on more important things than fireworks on New Year's Eve.
Well, and
But that's-
while we're waiting for the ordinance to come back to us, we can get feedback from citizens, and
But that's another point. The police are usually pretty busy that night, and that's
Yeah.
one more thing to
they're
add to their
drunk
plate.
driving and
That's one more thing to add to the plate on that night.
So,
Yeah, let's look at the secondary cost of this, both to our citizens, our police department, et cetera. I think this needs to be tabled at best.
Well, you can bring it back.
Jay.
So I am aware off the top of my head of one other jurisdiction that allows them on New Year's Day, and I believe it's New Year's Day only.
Yep.
I haven't really got into that ordinance with that local jurisdiction. You all have to set law and policy. My recommendation would be no on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
yeah,
if you're
I'm
asking.
kind of in the same boat on that one. But I don't have a vote, so
That's right.
I can certainly research the local jurisdiction and get that information to the deputy city administrator.
yeah, city administrator.
Yeah, we'll bring you something and you can
Well,
discuss it at that time.
yep. I'll have a
Hey,
cage match.
Jim,
Yes.
thank you, Mayor, what is the opportunity to regulate through the permitting process with the fireworks vendors, the size of the gauge of the fireworks? I had numerous constituents speak to me both during and after the 4th of July or Independence Day. Just the size of the fireworks that were being exploded. And again, I understand that me or my family can buy from out of Gardner and blow up in Gardner. So there's some limits to this legislation. But what are the opportunities internally to limit that gauge of fireworks being sold through the permitting process?
That's state law.
Yeah, the state law allows for Class C or 1.3 gram fireworks. That's a Class C designation. I mean, internally, I assuming we could make it a rule that they can't sell them in Gardner. I think those are probably.
Yeah, I think the issue would be the enforcement side of that. As we do it with the permits now, we do inspect the stands when they're first being put up to make sure they're complying with whatever
Yep.
rules. I guess it would be one of those that if you were to go that route, then we'd need to be checking all their inventory. I don't know how many hours that might take in additional inspections, just to check it as they start their stands. And then after that, what we tried to do this year with police and other things was if we thought we had somebody who was out of compliance, we did spot checks essentially, which I think went better than just the single check at the beginning of the process. But I think, again, you're talking about inspecting an inventory that may be on the display stand or in a storage container that's associated with the display stand.
Yeah, but I would very strongly doubt that the folks, I mean, they could lose their license if they were caught selling a banned explosive or banned fireworks at their stands.
I don't think we had any issue. I think it's maybe 1.4 gram is Class C and 1.3 is Class B. But yeah, I don't think.
I mean, I don't know of any fireworks stand that would take that chance. Now,
they can
that
go
does
to
not.
Missouri and get them.
Yeah, they can go to Missouri, or they can order them online, and I mean that's something that is done by some people to get around that restriction. I don't know how you would, govern that within the city.
Well, Mayor, I appreciate that. I appreciate Mr. Knoppett's comments. I'm not trying to legislate perfection. I mean, we do have rights in this beautiful country that we live in. I think that, earmarking that clearly in the permitting process, and I'm well aware of labor time, but Mr. Knoppett also answered that question or a solution in that we would spot check said fireworks stands. I would take it a step further and suggest maybe reducing the number of fireworks stands, which I think would create a real desire with limited seats on the bus, if you will, of the number of fireworks stands, which have grown over the last 4 or 5 years in the city of Gardner for obvious reasons.
Director Knoppett?
Number of stands have stayed about the same. Last couple of years have stayed about the same. We're running that 8 to 10 range, essentially, is what it's been.
Yeah, I would suggest 6 to 8, Dave.
Yep. City Attorney?
Yeah. So we do, the current ordinance already does provide very specific detail about the nature of the fireworks and the grade. It's in section 10.30 A1A. Talks about the grade. It's about a paragraph long as to what a consumer firework is. Okay. So the mechanism already exists in ordinance for enforcement. It would, if there's information that people are violating it, you would just need to cite them or handle it as you normally would for a violation of the UPOC.
Yeah, I don't think, Randy, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he's talking about people violating that. I think he's talking about things that are within the neighborhood Class C firework, like mortars that he wants to limit or ban.
Well, the mortars are
one of the favorites.
Yeah, that's
And as somebody who's worked a tent for a nonprofit, they're what sell, and they're expensive. So the stands love selling mortars, right? They don't care how many sparklers you buy. They want to know how many of those boxes of Excalibur you're going to buy at $130 a pop.
Yep. And I understand there's a concern amongst the folks in the community. There's a concern amongst the folks in the community about that size of explosive.
Exactly.
Precisely the noise and the effects that it can have on pets and people with certain disabilities as well as PTSD.
But that size is legal in the state of Kansas, so they could buy it from anywhere. And so then
we're still set it off in Gardner.
We're asking our police department to go around to every house shooting off and look at their inventory. That's, I mean, it's just not going to happen. All it's going to do is hurt our firework tents because people are going to have to leave Gardner to buy what they want.
Oh, they will leave Gardner to buy what they want.
Right.
The only way you can really control what is bought is if you're getting it at the vendor, right? That's how they got rid of bottle rockets. They made a state law, and then nobody wanted to lose their license.
Yep.
Right. So I mean, that still happens. You can buy them in Missouri, but it's far and few.
Yep.
I think if you try to say, well, this Class C firework is eligible, but this one is not, you're asking for a world of trouble of differentiating, and then you're going to have to tell those vendors, don't bring perfectly legal fireworks to Gardner because they're not legal here. Sounds like a mess.
But what will happen is that the stands won't open,
They may not. I don't know.
which I think would probably satisfy what you're trying to do, Randy, in limiting stands.
I'm not in favor of changing the class of fireworks that we sell. If we're following the state law, then I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate everybody's state law precedents. Municipalities can have stricter. I'm not asking the police neither to go door to door. I think that's ridiculous to consider or even suggest. But I think through the permitting process, we can limit that. As for out-of-state Amazon type of deliveries, I guess it is what it is. And the mayor spoke well to it. We have albeit a minority, we do have a portion of the community that has PTSD, their pets, their autistic kids, special needs kids, and or disabled folks that are triggered, and I think they should be considered. Again, I stress the fact that Gardner Police doesn't need to go door to door. I've never said that. But it should be considered through the permitting process and the permitting process alone. No different than other restrictions or limit of restrictions as we've seen in the no mask situation.
Is there a consensus from the council to move forward with that?
No.
With looking at a permitting change to ban certain mortars?
No.
No.
Okay. I think we have four councilmen or council members here, Randy, that aren't interested in that right now.
Fair enough. I appreciate the consideration.
Nope, no problem. I appreciate it. Thanks.
What
Is
else
there-
do you need?
Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss on this? I think we've got direction, and I think we've got a path forward, so there'll be something coming back in form of voter ordinance probably in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Moving on to public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. Ground rules are the same. If you wish to come forward, there's a clock on my right, your left. It's a 5-minute time clock. If you come up, please keep your remarks within that 5-minute window. No profanity, no personal attacks. With that being said, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. The podium is now open. Seeing no one coming forward, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any member of the council who wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Deaton, second Baldwin, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda passes. Wow. Nothing on planning and zoning, nothing in committee recommendations or old business. New business, item number 1. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of $4,710,000 in principal amount of general obligation refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2021A of the City of Gardner, Kansas, and providing for the levy and collection of annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal and interest on the bonds as they become due. Matt Wolf, you're busy tonight.
The next 4 business items are all related to our debt sale for 2021, our Series 2021A and 2021B general obligation bonds. To kind of streamline things, I invited Senior Municipal Advisor Bruce Kimball from Ellers and Bond Counsel Tyler Ellsworth from Kutak Rock here to give a presentation that will cover all 4 items. So I'm going to turn that over to Bruce.
Good evening. I'm Bruce Kimball with Ellers. It's great to be with you in person after this long hiatus. And again, the mayor will probably tease me, but I'm continuing my streak of bringing really good bond results. So We're going to refer to the two salary reports that I believe Sharon distributed. I apologize, in the PDF that I sent Sharon, somehow the S&P rating report, the headers showed up, but the text is blank, as you'll see, and we'll make sure that we get you a copy of the rating report after tonight's agenda, and I can certainly answer any questions you have about it, but I didn't want you all thinking that your copy of the rating or of the sale report didn't have the rating report. So, great. Well, so as you probably remember, this first issue, 2021A, was for 4 separate purposes. It was to finance a small amount of wastewater system improvements. It was to do a current refunding of the city's remaining 2011A bonds just for interest rate savings. Same thing with the 2012A bonds. And then we're doing definitive financing on the 2019C temporary notes that were issued for infrastructure related to Plaza South. And as you can see from this first page, we received 10 bids today at 11 a.m. on the city's behalf. And Piper Sandler, previously Piper Jaffray, was the winning bid with a true interest cost of 0.90% on this 11-year financing. So pretty outstanding, and the low interest rate environment just keeps on continuing. I would point out, and we can go through some of the detail, but in terms of the refunding portions of the financing, we achieved net savings to the city of about $111,000 on the 2011 A bonds and about $226,000 on the 2012 A bonds portions. And so altogether, you're saving net to the city about $337,000 from these refundings. Really great results, and direct savings to the city for the next 10 to 11 years. Let me just spend a moment on the bid tabulation, so I ask you to go forward a few pages. This just shows, and this is the part of the report that I'm referring to, this just goes to show how incredibly aggressively the bond market bid for the city of Gardner's bonds today. And this is really what we're seeing on most bond sales, but not to this extent. I think I've told you before that there's a imbalance in the market right now between supply and demand. There's too much demand chasing too little supply, and so that's keeping interest rates down. But that's especially true in Kansas. There's a lot of investors that want that double tax exemption in Kansas, and relatively speaking, there's fewer issuers selling new paper to meet that demand. So your bonds here sell even better than bonds in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, for the given credit rating that you have of AA-. So that's all the good for the city of Gardner. And you can see the Piper Sandler bid was a premium bid. You've seen these before, where the coupons on the bonds might be 3%, 1%, sort of bopping around there. But the yields follow a more orderly progression, starting with a low yield on the first bond of 0.15%. And going up to 1.2%. So when you average those out for the overall bond issue, that's how you get to about 0.9% with that winning bid. But now I'll just ask you to look through the other couple of pages, and you can see how incredibly tightly clumped together the bids were. Even the last place bid from Hilltop in Dallas was at 1.15%, so less than 25 basis points or 0.25%, separating number 1 from number 10. Then finally, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the next few pages, but certainly would be happy to answer questions you might have. We did just want to give you the summary information on the overall bond issue, as well as for each separate individual purpose. There's 4 purposes. And then I would note, and the savings, the refunding savings for the 2 refundings are in here as well. And then let me just tell you a little bit about the rating process, because it was somewhat unique. Finance Director Matt Wolf, and what is Nancy's title, Matt?
Fiscal Services Manager.
Fiscal Services Manager, Attorney, and have done such a good job in corresponding with and communicating with S&P in the last several years that when it came time for us to set up a rating call with S&P for these transactions, they said, well, you've given us a lot of really great information over the years, and we have your new audit for 2020. We don't even think we need to have a call for this rating transaction, which I don't think that's ever happened to me before in almost 25 years of doing this work. So I'm guessing if and when we sell bonds later this year, they'll probably feel obligated to do a rating call. But it just goes to, speaks to the incredible respect that S&P has for your financial services staff and the quality of the information that you've provided to them in the past. So that's really kudos to Matt and to Nancy on that. Do you have any questions about the 2021 A bonds before I just do a very brief report on the B bonds? And then I'll turn it over to you to go through the individual ordinances and resolutions, and of course, Bond Counsel Ellsworth is available to answer questions you might have on those.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go through those, the 2021B
Perfect.
Presentation, and then there'll obviously be public comment, and then we'll come back and
Very good.
ask any questions we need to ask.
Great.
Great, thanks.
So moving on to the second sale day report, this had a much simpler purpose. It was just to refinance the 2019 D temporary notes on a definitive basis that were sold for Waverly Plaza. And we received 4 bids, which was actually really good. There's usually less bids on taxable paper than there are for tax exempt. And the winning bid came from Commerce Bank right here in Kansas City on that transaction. What was also great about receiving 4 bids is that these bonds go out for 20 years. You're allowing the beneficiaries of this benefit district to pay back over up to 20 years. And so really outstanding results there as well. And the interest rate was considerably better than what we had anticipated on this issue as well. So if you flip to the bid tabulation, you can see that Commerce's true interest cost was 1.95%. We had been thinking we'd probably be closer to 2.5 or 2.6%, and even that we thought would be pretty good. And you can see, again, that the bidding was relatively close, not quite as close as on the A bonds, but still well below what our pre-sale estimates were for this transaction. And then finally, we did include the sources and uses and the debt schedule on this. And again, special assessments will be paying this debt service. So finally, in case I don't get a chance to say it, congratulations to the city, to you as the governing body, to the staff, and to the taxpayers, because ultimately the taxpayers are benefiting from your credit rating and from your great financial management and the low interest rates that you're able to attract. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate it. Any other parts of the presentation, or do we?
I think we can move on.
I'm sorry?
We can move on to the public comment.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll move on to public comment on the new business item number 1. Does anyone wish to come forward and speak on that ordinance? Seeing none, any questions from council on either the 2021A or 2021B issuances?
I just thought it was great that we have a AA- rating, and I know it's apples and oranges because it's over 11 years, but we just saved 1.36 mils.
I think that's yeah, because all this is coming out of the bond and interest fund, correct? So that is actually, when we do run short, we subsidize that from the general fund, correct, Matt?
Correct. They're both tax levy funds, and mill rates do move between them depending on need.
So you were correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor, I appreciate Councilman Baldwin's comment. He stole some of my thunder, for which is warranted. Bruce, why was Commerce so attracted to that? And when I say attracted, you estimated 2.25, 2.5, and they came in at 1 point something. What was so attractive to them for that response?
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Grzegorczyk, I can speculate about what specifically Commerce was looking for with this transaction. You know, I think that they must have had an investor that, or a class of investors that was really just looking for the safety and security of the AA- rating, but didn't need the tax advantages of the double tax exemption, federal and state. And so we're looking for, you know, they were willing to accept a yield overall less than 2%, which seems mind-boggling to me as an individual, but you know, they wouldn't have bid that aggressively, and they really did. I mean, I don't want to make anyone at Commerce feel bad, but they left money on the table, right? They were 25 basis points lower than the cover bid from Country Club. So Randy, it's a great question. I wish I could give you a specific insight, but that's really the beauty of competitive bids, right? Because on any given day and time, you're really attracting bids from the overall national marketplace, and you're not just going direct to one investment bank and saying, oh, what will you give us? You're saying, hey, we've got this great product here, and give us your best bid. And obviously Commerce or their investors really wanted those bonds. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your response, Bruce. And perhaps this is apples and oranges, but I play in the RFP world, a request for proposal, and obviously the lowest bid or best price versus value wins. But what I guess how I translate this specific to the Waverly project is that it is a solid project. If I'm not mistaken, so secondary investors should be interested if I'm on the right page here.
Mayor and Councilmember Gorsuch, certainly there might be some local investors that are wanting to buy local and are specifically interested in buying into this project. I would say that far and away, though, the thing that investors look for is your general obligation pledge. Pledging the full credit of the city, and that credit rating with S&P.
Okay, thank you, Bruce.
Yep.
All right, we have 4 items, as Director Wolf had said. We will go ahead and work through these individually. So each one of them has a separate vote. There's 2 ordinances and 2 resolutions. The first 2 have to do with the Series 2021A, and agenda items 3 and 4 have to do with 2021B series. Since we've already discussed those and already taken questions, we'll go ahead and just run through these one by one for the sake of brevity. So we'll start with new business item number 1. I'd like to entertain a motion, new business item number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Baldwin, second Deaton, that we adopt ordinance number 2712, an ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of $4,710,000 principal amount of general obligation refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2021A of the City of Gardner, Kansas, and providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on the bonds as they become due. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Gorsuch?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilmember Deaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
Ordinance number 2712 passes. I have an entertain a motion on new business item number 2.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Deaton, second Baldwin, that we adopt resolution number 2089, a resolution prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of $4,710,000 principal amount of general obligation refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2021A of the City of Gardner, Kansas, previously authorized by an ordinance of the city. City Clerk.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilmember Deaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
Councilmember Gorsuch?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, resolution number 2089 passes. New business item number 3. Can I have entertain a motion on ordinance number 2713?
So moved.
Second.
Motion Deaton, second Baldwin, that we adopt ordinance number 2713, an ordinance authorizing the issue and delivery of $2,185,000 principal amount of general obligation bonds, Series 2021B, taxable under federal law of the City of Gardner, Kansas, and providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on the bonds as they become due. City Clerk.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilmember Deaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
Councilmember Gorsuch?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Ordinance number 2713 passes. And finally, can I have an entertained motion on resolution number 2090?
So moved.
Second.
Motion Deaton, second Baldwin, that we adopt resolution number 2090, a resolution prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of $2,185,000 principal amount of taxable general obligation bonds, Series 2021B, taxable under federal law of the City of Gardner, Kansas, previously authorized by an ordinance of the city. City Clerk.
Councilmember Deaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
Councilmember Gorsuch?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Yes.
Resolution number 2090 passes. Thank you very much, Director Wolf. Thank you, Finance Team, and thank you to Bruce and to Tyler who's here also in the audience. Thank you again and it's good to see you guys. It's been a while.
Likewise.
Absolutely. All right, new business item number 5, consider adopting a resolution approving the 2022 to 2026 County Assistant Road System Program. Public Works Director Kellen Headley. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Each year, the city prepares a 5-year plan for the County Assistance Road System, the CARS program. That funding is typically used for up to 50% of construction on arterial road system projects. For this year's 5-year plan, it's looking at the 2022 to 2026 list. Primary focus is on the 2022 submission, as that's the submission that will be reviewed for funding this year by the Board of County Commissioners. That project that the staff is recommending is the 167th Street resurfacing from Center to Moonlight. That's the staff recommendation of the most pressing need, both in condition and use factors right now for our arterial network. Other than that, the staff recommends adopting the resolution approving the list as it's stated.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kellen. Any public comment on new business item number 5? Seeing not any questions for Kellen, I do have one real quick, and that is the scope of this particular improvement to 167th Street. There have been questions, concerns about shoulders and whether or not this particular resurfacing would include shoulders on that particular piece of road.
This particular project does not, is straight resurfacing essentially to preserve the current pavement.
Okay. Is there anything in the CIE that would address that? It's the 15-year capital improvement element.
I'm not aware of a full surface or a full depth replacement of that one yet in the CIE.
Yeah.
When we look at
So,
that,
Mayor, I got similar feedback from the constituents, and I'm in South Texas as I speak to you. And I don't mean to compare roads from one state to another because I think it is apples and avocados. But why are shoulders not considered? And is this particular piece of the roadway a part of the half-cent sales tax that the constituents are already paying?
So, Councilmember Gregorczyk, what I would say is when a arterial road is completely replaced and improved is when we would typically put shoulders on it. These roads were originally developed essentially as country roads and then at some point brought to unimproved paved roads. The current both use and remaining pavement life left on this road system or this section of that road don't currently require bringing it up to a full improved arterial status at this time.
Yeah,
Councilman, I wouldn't say it's not considered. It is considered, but the expense of doing that would be in the millions of dollars. You have to deal with the drainage and other things like that when you put on shoulders. So this is just whatever. This is a mill and overlay improvement. So this isn't a complete redesign for that roadway.
Yeah, Mr. Jim, I appreciate your input, and I guess my question on behalf of the same group of, I guess, a handful of citizens is, when do we meet that requirement threshold, I guess? I mean, it's gone from a caliche road or a dirt road to a paved road or maybe even an oil-based dirt road and then to a paved road, and now we're resurfacing or milling and resurfacing. What drives the requirement that it would have a shoulder? And I don't know if you guys have been down 167th in a while, but it's got a heavy traffic. So, and again, we can take studies on that to figure that out versus just my input. But what is the threshold to get that shoulder?
So I'm not certain the exact threshold. However, we are getting an update of our traffic counts later this year. We typically do that about every 1 to 2 years. And that will inform future planning on that section of roadway along with the rest of the arterial network. We are also getting a condition update on all of our road network later this year as well. Those two factors are the primary drivers towards both the necessity of either repairs or upgrades to our road system. So that will certainly be looked at as we get that additional data over the next year.
Councilman
that's
Baldwin.
good.
Councilman
Yeah,
Baldwin.
that's good. That's good to hear. So, is that in October, November of this year, like fourth quarter, or when should we see that so that we can revisit it with better data?
I'm not certain at this time when exactly we will be receiving that data.
Councilman Baldwin,
Thank you, sir.
you had asked for.
So I had asked a couple of years ago about 167th, and I think mill and overlay is appropriate now. What I assume will happen, and I think this is what you're wanting, Randy, is to hear this. Once this is done, then that new road, milled and overlaid, right? Nice road, not new. That and will attract more development to the north side, right, west of White Drive. It's White, I think.
Yep.
And we have the area over by the Justice Center, and then we have the new apartments coming in. And as the traffic counts come up, I assume we'll end up needing a turn lane right there. So we'll have a third lane, similar to what we're doing on Waverly. So I would imagine at that time we would have a rebuild, and that would then cause shoulders and everything else to happen.
That's the progression that happened on Madison east of Center when they started having that development out there. So I would expect that something.
Councilman Baldwin, you're exactly right. I'm just trying to be proactive and kind of get ahead of that curve. But you're exactly right, and I understand that residential development, commercial development, et cetera, drives that. I'm just trying to get ahead of that, considering the folks that that live on the south side of 167th. But point taken. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, very good.
Any other questions for Kellen? Not on this cars list, but is there any thought as to what we might be doing with the county? I know that we've got a Southwest Johnson County transportation plan reevaluation right now, particularly around 199th Street. Obviously, there needs to be improvements to that road, but I know that the county was interested in doing some of those improvements. We took the jurisdiction of that road. And would there be an option to be able to split the cost with the county on that particular road via cars at some point to, in future years, obviously not this year, but in future years to try to leverage that program to improve 199th Street?
You want to talk to him about the discussion you had about cars in particular with the county? About us receiving more funding for capital than
Oh, so at current, CARS looks at about a 5-year kind of running rate of essentially per capita share of the CARS program. We're currently somewhere above 125% of our typical 5-year run. A typical year for us would be somewhere around 500,000 as our share of, or their share of a project. I believe the section of 199th Street that is within the city has a need of something like $3+ million for bringing it up to adding shoulders and resurfacing. It's certainly something that can be included in the CARS program. However, it would be looked at along with the entirety of our arterial system. So right now it's not on the 5-year plan. However, this plan changes as conditions update and use of each section of roadway updates with new traffic counts. So it could certainly slide on at some point.
I was thinking more around the fact that that particular stretch of road was already budgeted by the county to have that road widened before we actually took administration of that road.
And that'll certainly be part of the discussion.
It needs to be.
We have a kickoff on, I believe it's with
Okay.
Edgerton
Mhm.
and the county.
And Spring Hill is not included in those discussions.
I asked that they be included, so I
Okay.
haven't got any reply, but Commissioner Allenbrand agreed that they should be there.
Absolutely, they should be. Anything on
So-
199th? Or?
So the discussion on 199th is going to focus on truck traffic and how we redirect it. So if the solution is to do something other than redirect it, then we'll focus on funding, who's paying for it, and how that proceeds going forward.
Sure, but even without the truck traffic, that road is in need of some improvements, especially from the standpoint of passenger cars are actually more at risk on that road than the trucks are.
The goal
given-
is to redirect traffic away from, truck traffic away from 199th.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I know that's not part of this, not germane to this discussion, but I wanted to mention that for the
No
record.
problem.
All right. Any other questions? All right, I will entertain motion.
Hey, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. And you're right, this is not extremely germane to the agenda item, but, it goes back to some of my conversations that I had with annexation and additional cost and, the city annexed, and it did it above board, and Jim did a good job of doing that, and we've moved forward. But, the cost to the county for said city annexation is a bit questionable. So I guess I would challenge us and/or future electeds to understand what is the ancillary or the secondary cost to these types of annexations, so that we can bring that value to those that are annexed. But I'll let sleeping dogs lie.
Well, I would tend to disagree with you on this one, Randy, because actually, from the county's perspective, they're saving a lot of money by having the roads owned by the city of Gardner. Now, what you're saying is that should have been taken into consideration when we annexed. We understood we were taking administration of that road. What was not contemplated by the city was that the county would withdraw their participation completely from that stretch of road from the standpoint of the improvements that were already on the books and already budgeted by the county. So basically, that was a county decision that was unilateral and done without the consultation or the consent of our city. So if you want to talk about the fact that we went in there and because we annexed, that we ended up losing the ability to get that road repaired, no, it was because the county made a unilateral decision without our consultation to do that, and that was not. I have my own thoughts on that.
As do I, sir. So we'll let sleeping dogs lie. It's not here nor there at this point, and I'll perhaps have the opportunity to leverage those relationships and rediscover those conversations. But I hear you loud and clear.
Well, I didn't bring up that dog. You did, but we'll have that discussion offline.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
All right. That being said, I'll entertain a motion on Resolution 2091.
So moved.
Second?
Motion Deed and second Baldwin that we adopt resolution number 2091, a resolution approving a 5-year program of road improvements for 2022 to 2026 within the city of Gardner, Kansas. City Clerk.
Councilmember Winters,
Yes.
Councilmember Gregorczyk,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin,
Yes.
Councilmember Deaton,
Yes.
Resolution 2091 passes. All right, we'll move on to council updates. That's the end of our regular business. We do have an executive session after council updates. Does staff have anything for council? I'm going to start with I'll start with Dave Knopick, since he was the last one to get here.
Nothing. Nothing tonight.
Okay. We've got Adrian Halperek over there for Jason Bruce. How you doing?
I'm good. I was just gonna say that our Gardner Grind event is August 21st, and we have just over 200 people so far signed up for that. This thing's weird. Sorry. And then today, our Grand Slam, the Beer, Wine, and Spirits Fest tickets just went on sale today. So
those will go fast.
Yeah, we hope so.
If every past year is any indication, they'll go pretty fast.
As long as we don't have any rain this year.
Well, can't control that. All right, utilities, Gans Garcia.
Nothing tonight.
All right, great. Chief Belcher.
Nothing tonight.
City Clerk.
Nothing tonight.
Okay, Finance Director Wolf.
Thank you, Council, for direction on the budget. My staff will work on putting together the budget draft and putting that online
Great.
for citizens to see.
Thank you, and I personally appreciate all the hard work that you and your staff do on a daily basis, and that praise that came from Bruce Kimmel with regard to your to Nancy and yourself is well earned, and I wanted to let you know that you get the gratitude of the governing body on that. You guys earn your distinguished budget presentation awards and your annual report awards, and we have one of the best, if not the best, finance staff in all the metro area, and I just want to let you know that. Yep. All right, Kellen Headley, I didn't forget about you.
Nothing further tonight.
Okay. City Attorney, Dink.
Nothing from me.
All right. Deputy City Administrator Nasta.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay. City Administrator Pruding, who's having a slight conversation with our finance director. Yes.
Yeah, I was just checking to make sure that the governing body had been notified that we received the first tranche of ARPA funds.
Oh, great. So
I
American
wasn't sure
Rescue
if we-
Plan funds.
Yeah,
Yes.
I wasn't sure if that made it into the Friday minute memo.
I believe it did, but there was going to be some
Okay.
discussion about how to dispense those funds at some point. I know that we have not had those.
So we haven't gotten final guidance yet.
Yep.
So we've talked repeatedly in the county manager's calls about, how that's gonna work, and still haven't got it yet. So when we get it, then we'll be better prepared to have it.
My understanding is that there's not a lot of guidance at all in these funds. They're primarily discretionary,
Yeah.
which concerns me a little bit, because I didn't want a city to have a slush fund. If we're going to have these funds, we have to know, what are we going to do with them. Like,
Right.
for example, if we decide that we're going to utilize them to help to offset some of our issues with wastewater, for example, or something like that.
Right.
But we'll have those discussions, and hopefully we'll get some guidance from the county on that.
And I know there's at least a couple jurisdictions in the county that are going to wait till they get the second payment in a year before they do anything with it.
Okay, all right. So will those just go into our general fund reserves in the meantime?
I don't know, I gave the check to Matt, so I don't.
Hey,
That's one plan if we're going to hold on to it for a while. I think we're going to have either a presentation or a work session on it at some point where we give you after we get the final guidance, we're going to provide you different scenarios or different alternatives, and then we'll kind of put the money where we need to based on that.
okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. So we're going to go on to council and whether they have anything for staff. I'm going to start with Councilman Gregorczyk.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, and I hope you guys can hear me clearly. I don't hear you clearly, not you in particular, Mayor, but just generally speaking. With respect to the COVID funds, I do look forward to a robust discussion, and my intent is to roll that back into the investment of our infrastructure and hopefully drive down the cost to the citizens. Other than that, Mayor, I don't have anything.
All right, thanks, Randy. Councilwoman Roberts.
I have nothing, but thank you for asking.
Always will. Councilwoman Deaton.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Okay. Council Vice President.
Nothing tonight.
All right. And Council President.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Nothing. Okay, well, I came back from the reason why I was here 2 minutes before the start of the work session. Heck, I'm here usually 2 minutes before the start of every meeting. But I mean, for tonight it was because we had the Southwest Johnson County EDC annual meeting over at the Hampton Inn. Our featured speaker was the Lieutenant Governor and Secretary of Commerce, David Toland, and it speaks to the relationships that have been built over the last 3 to 4 years that we were able to get the Lieutenant Governor here to speak with us on economic development. He has very strongly championed the cause of mid-range cities like ours and Topeka to try to get us some more tools for our quiver for the perspective of economic development incentives. And so I wanted to thank Toland David Holland for coming in and working with us and getting some of those things passed at the state level. I think he said in his presentation that they had more economic development bills passed in the last year than they had in the last 10 years prior. So it's good to see that the state of Kansas is finally getting more serious about doing economic development in a collaborative way with folks who want to do business with our state. So hopefully that will trickle down to our city. That being said, I will go on ahead and conclude the business of the meeting other than the executive session. I will entertain a motion to recess into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All right, and how much do we need? 30 minutes? Okay, great. Motion Baldwin, second Deaton, that we recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 to discuss matters of attorney-client privilege related to proposed development projects beginning at 8:13 p.m. and returning to regular session at 8:43 p.m. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? We stand in recess. resume regular session?
So moved.
Second, okay. Motion Gregorczyk, second Winters, that we resume regular session. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, any abstentions? We are back in regular session. I'm going to entertain a motion to go back into executive session.
So moved.
Second. All right, motion Roberts, second Winters, that we recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 to discuss matters of attorney-client privilege related to proposed development projects beginning at 8:44 p.m. and returning to regular session at 8:59 p.m. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Do you say aye, Randy? Aye. All right. Any opposed? All right. We are back in executive session. Session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Baldwin, second Deaton, that we resume regular session. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? We are back in regular session. I entertain a motion. Wait, do you have anything for us, Councilwoman Deaton?
No, not.
Okay. You had mentioned you might have something. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Baldwin, second Deaton, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? We are out of here.